Hello, my dear friends, my lovely audiences. Welcome to the East West Show. Jack Chow with G&E TV. For the past 1 week, we've been busy with the subject of the incident that happened in Charlottesville, in Virginia, and the aftermath. A little bit we talked about, and the consequences, and it's still hanging right now. The issue is not over, especially the issue when it's brought up to the national level, though, and the issue is not local issue anymore. So there are lots of things mixed into it, history-wise, for contemporary issues, and also issues to the future. Altogether, we, the Americans, get a little confused about what we want to do, what's happening, what will happen, what we want to do out of it. Plus, we have a president that who acted reluctant to give a comment, a proper comment, whatever, to my view. And of course, we'll discuss about it. Is it proper or not proper? And today with me is my good friend, Mr. Thomas Johnston. He's a trial attorney, super attorney at law. And I believe lots of issues of these go to law, to legal perspective, to see do they or do they not have the right to do so, to do what they do, right? So to my dear friend Thomas, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Jack. And thanks for having me back on your show.
Very good, very good. Of course, we have done 1, 2, 3, 4 shows with this issue, and none of the 4 take the legal perspective. In general, what do you describe what you have seen? Please.
Well, the first, thank you, Jack. The first thing that I've seen is as a citizen, and that's how the president responded to that, the Charlottesville tragedy. And I think it was totally inappropriate, and that on a political level and a leadership level, he missed the opportunity on purpose to say that neo-Nazism, white supremacy is dead wrong, and that what was happening in Charlottesville was wrong. And that when he said there's fine people on both sides, he should have known by that time that what was happening there were people with torches saying the Jews will not replace us, ethnic, anti-black comments, terrible comments against homosexuals. And it was a very hateful, scary situation. And on top of that, there were a lot of people with weapons and a militia situation that was very bad.
Okay.
So politically and with leadership, I think that is terrible. What it also shows is legally, what does the Constitution allow for rallies? What does the First Amendment give people the right to do?
All right.
And I do have a lot of thoughts about that.
Please. And that exactly is my second question, because everybody applies to Constitution now, at this moment, especially now. And they're saying we do have the right, subject to Constitution, to express what we want to express, to say what we want to say, to put up a statue we like, to put up a monument we like, to call whatever, whoever. So do they not have the right? In other words, the Constitution of freedom of expression doesn't have a limitation. Please.
The First Amendment, it's a beautiful amendment. And when we started the Constitution, there was an idea that each of us as Americans has the right to life, liberty, property, happiness. And that we could get these things ourselves, and the government shouldn't interfere. And then the time came to do a Bill of Rights, to make changes to the Constitution. And the first change that's made is the First Amendment, and that's the freedom of speech. And what it says is that, and I think it's important that it was the first of the Bill of Rights, the 10th Amendment, but what it says is the government isn't going to interfere or infringe upon people's rights to say certain things, particularly on political issues, that the government is not going to get in the way of people expressing themselves on political issues unless there are very strict circumstances. And over the last 200 years, the Supreme Court has struggled with what are the restrictions on this very important right of political speech. And some of it came up, like Justice Holmes. He said you can't yell fire in a movie theater, right? That's speech, you can't do that.
Oh yeah, you can't yell fire.
That's obvious, right? In business, you can't lie and commit a fraud.
All right.
That's free speech, but you can't do that. There's a limit
you're right,
there.
you're right,
okay?
yeah.
But then it starts getting more difficult. And there was a big case, Brandenburg versus the KKK. And this was back in the 60s. And the KKK wanted to have a rally, and the town wanted to limit it. And the Supreme Court went through the difficult exercise of what would be allowed. Because obviously, I mean, not obviously, but to the government, that was offensive speech. This is a group of white supremacists who want to say hateful, terrible things that's harmful to our town.
Offensive things, yes.
Right. But then the Supreme Court said, look, just because this group wants to say hateful things, even though that they're terrible, the First Amendment gives them a right to say those things. But the government, the local governments can control the time of the speech, the place,
the location,
and the manner. So the Supreme Court gave these local governments some ways to control these types of rallies. Time, place, manner. And that's been important. And then the First Amendment speech has been stretched in more difficult ways. You might remember when we had our soldiers, sailors, and Marines and airmen coming home and being buried, that there was that Westboro group that would picket the lines of these funeral lines, and they'd have these horrible signs saying that the veterans deserve to die, and God hates fags, and all sorts of very offensive things. But the First Amendment came into play there, and the courts were giving them the right to say what they wanted, even though it was the worst possible thing you could possibly imagine. So then we got to look at it and say, okay, what about now? What about with Charlottesville? What was different about that situation than the Brandenburg case? Or the Westboro case? And what I think is different is that there was violence. And what Brandenburg said, that opinion said when they dealt with this issue in the 60s was, it's not enough that they're hateful or that they might say some vague threats of violence. But if they are there and they will incite violence, and the people there are likely to do what is being said, like, you know, kill, 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 and there are people there that would act on that, then that has crossed the line. And in Charlottesville, what happened is those lines were crossed, and it went from a disgusting display of speech that I cannot stand to violence, and that is not allowed. So you cannot, the First Amendment doesn't protect a group coming in with weapons to threaten.
And what did the other side, the opposing side, do?
Well, what you're going to find is when there's a group, you'll have, let's just call them neutral protesters, counter protesters, and that's not uncommon. So what usually happens is they will have the police, the local police will try to create an environment where there can be protesters and counter protesters, and that they should not picket. Now what was happening was in that Emancipation Park and then in another park, the counter protesters were in a line, and then the protesters were breaching that line.
They're approaching them.
Right, so then there's a breach of that, and then there are other counter-protesters who step in to try to help the counter-protesters maintain their line.
In other words, the defense, the kind of defense.
And then it's completely out of control. But I don't think that you can look at it as these are two people in a bar fight, okay? And that there's culpability on both sides. I don't see that, Jack. I see it much different than this.
Okay.
And I see it as these white supremacists that represent the worst part of the United States, and some people who were willing to put themselves on the line to try to stop that.
To protest it.
They did, right, to say, hey, listen, I don't want that here.
All right.
And if we were outside your studio and there was KKK people and white supremacists coming, I think you and I, maybe we'd go out there and say,
we'll
hey,
go out there and say,
hey, you're not welcome here, you know. So they're not equivalent. I saw this. It was pretty powerful.
In other words, in this case, we've given this analysis that's deep, this profoundly, what President Donald Trump stated 2 days, even 2 days after, was not right.
It wasn't right, Jack. And I think it was a turning point for me. You know, with the president, I got to tell you, I didn't vote for him. Okay.
Yeah, no, I didn't either. Yeah.
But I've voted Republican before, but I didn't. He wasn't my candidate. But hey, you hope things work out great. And right, just because it's not someone you voted for
once
doesn't mean.
Once he's there, we hope he put up the best he could. Yeah.
Yes, but this was too much for me, and I think that as a country, we have to break from that president, our president, and say, hey, we're not okay with that, and we do not think that there's an equivalence on both sides. And you know, as me as a parent and as a citizen, it became important for me to say that to people I know and to my kids.
All right. Okay, very good. My dear friends, today we want to once again discuss about what's happened at Charlottesville in a week. With me today is my good friend, trial attorney at law, Thomas Johnston, and he's a wonderful attorney. Every time I have issues like this where I get myself lost, I will ask him for help. I believe lots of my audience among you are the same thing, because what's happening is so complicated. It is not a one-word thing. It is not a 1 hour thing. It is a mess up of everything. It's a mixture of everything. We want to just peel the onion one by one, layer by layer, and to see what's inside in the core of the very onion. So stay with us. We'll be right back, please. Hello, my dear friends, my lovely audience, ladies and gentlemen, my fellow Americans, I'd say, welcome back to the show. We have to care about what's going on now, because it's about us. It is about us, the Americans. We have American value. I have found out already that the value has been challenged, and challenged in a big way. What's happening in Charlottesville is one thing. What's being commented by the President of the United States is the other. Right? With me today is my good friend, Thomas Johnston. He is a trial attorney, winning attorney, very aggressive winning attorney on record for many trial cases. And he, right now, is not sending anybody to jail. He is trying to help us from a legal perspective about what's right and what's wrong, right? We were at the point talking about the protesters and the counter-protesters, the quote-unquote protesters and the counter-protesters, and then we're talking about the President of the United States, his statement about the incident 2 days later. Okay, now, my question, be it right or be it wrong is one thing. just one side. The second side of the issue is that consequences. What consequences shall the statement made by Donald Trump lead this country as versus the event as versus what's happening in this country? Please.
Well, I think that he picked a side, and he picked a side.
He picked a side. All right.
And he said, okay, when he doesn't condemn the white supremacists, the neo-Nazis, that fringe element, 2 days later, what he does is he picks that side. And I don't think he can undo that, not by the comments immediately where he says, well, I did repudiate
There are
them.
lots of explanations or excuses about that once undo it, but it's undurable.
That was the moment.
All
and what happens then is that side says, okay, wow, what a bump. We've never had that before. We have the President of the United States who has put his hand on the scale on our side. And that's how we feel. But the other side is people who were there, the counter-protesters, people that are against the hate groups or think that this is very frightening or are angry because of that fear that we're not going to let this happen in our country again. They feel, I cannot believe that the president of this country is against us. And they're trying to, the president's saying things that make it sound like we are as bad or
as
responsible as they are. That was a big, and that's a terrible feeling. And I think people are right to be angered by that. And it was surprising, even for a president that's been surprising in his divisiveness. This is a moment where a lot of the country feels that he's picked a side against us, and a lot of the country being the side that says, hey, I don't like racism. I don't like white supremacists trying to bully people and make them feel that they are less because of the color of their skin. That's against them.
Let's do some speculation, right? There are two analyses so far about Donald's speech, right? And one side says that he made a mistake by saying something through his loose lips or something like that, and of course that group represent a bunch of his voters who have voted him. From a mind of reciprocation, he had to do something. He had to take their stand. This is one analysis. The other analysis is that regardless of what happened, regardless of what, that speech itself represents where he is, represent what exactly he has in his mind. In other words, neo-Nazism, right, white supremacy, slavery, those things were in his mind. That is analysis of the second group. Where do you think you stand?
Well, I think the president says what is on his mind. I think that he's demonstrated that he's someone who says what he is thinking. And the comments that affected me the most are the ones that were made 2 days later. And I assume that he knew exactly what he was talking about when he said what he did. And when he said that there's very fine people on both sides, that was just dead wrong. And I think that he probably knew that.
In other words, he did it purposely, and what he says represents things on his own mind.
Yeah, I think that I do. I don't think that he is someone who is forced to say anything. I don't think that Steve Bannon made him say something. I think he decided what he wanted to say, and he said it. And I mean, if that's the reality of it, it's something that he said. Now, I don't know, Jack. I don't know if anyone's keeping score. I don't, it's, we'll have to see what happens at the next election.
To the Eastern itself, though, one side get defeated, get discouraged, right? The other side get encouraged. I mean, the white supremacy side gets encouraged, and that event is there. And lots of people denouncing the white supremacists. White supremacism.
Sure.
Right. Now, what is that? What could that instant or misconduct of that instant lead the country, lead the rest of the folks?
Well, it's terrible. I mean, we look at let's just talk about some of the race issues we have here. I mean, at the time of the Civil War, Jack, there were 4 million African Americans in slavery. People being bought, sold, rented, and slavery was the issue that caused us to go to the Civil War. And we have not healed from that. There's the slavery issue has not been resolved, and we will, as a nation, forever deal with that. In my view, the fact that there was a time in our history where we enslaved people, and that our Supreme Court at one time said that if a person, an African American, was not a citizen, and that is a horror that we will have to live with, and it is nowhere near made whole. So if we look at 4 million, there was at one time living 4 million slaves at the start of the Civil War. That the Civil War, slavery caused us to go to the Civil War. South Carolina seceded first to protect its slave rights. The rebels attacked Fort Sumter. And so that became the reason, and it's painful. And since then, there has been since the very end of the war to now, there's been a push to say, well, slavery wasn't really the only issue, or because it's easier to explain, when in reality, history shows that it was the issue. But we try to get away from it, and we use different words like protect our history or protect our culture, because who would ever disagree with such a broad statement? But slavery and what we did and what happened is something that we have to deal with for the rest of our life.
Thank you very much for saying that, because your statement made made 2 areas more understood by myself. Okay, number one, we're talking about the Civil War might have ended, right? The South been defeated, Robert E. Lee surrendered, right? That is not the end of the concept in slavery. Slavery concept. The word of slavery is still there. They still thought slavery was right. And this is number one, that I feel that area being clarified. Number two, slavery is a term better understood. You can enslave me, I may resist, I may capitulate, right? So it is a yes or no stuff. Okay. White supremacists, white supremacism is something very blurred, so we can't describe it. It is what does it look like? What does it smell like? Something deep in the brain, yet undescribable. Am I right?
Yeah, I think you're exactly right, except that these are people who think that they have power, or that they're a greater race than any other race. That we're taught that the color of the skin doesn't matter. They believe that that's all that matters.
That's all that matters.
And that there is some invisible hand that pushes white people to be the head of the world or the head of America, and it's such a stupid way of thinking that skin color would do that, because we know different.
If they say, of course, there are Black Lives Matter and there are White Lives Matter, both organizations, both kind of groups, right? Okay, if you give analysis, you will find out the Black Lives Matter came as a result of those misconduct whatsoever of policing, police in law enforcement cases. Be them right, be them wrong, that's a different story. it has a reason why it comes out, because it's a rebound. It's a rebound of that situation. Now, the white life matter, I don't see where it comes from. Anybody treat white in the different ways or whatever that made them a rebound to say white lives matter? And then there are different kind of people, different color of people. And you want to name every color? If you miss one color, you're not playing equal. This is almost a child game. So what's your comment about the birth? The birth, what gives birth to the white lives matter, please?
Well, I think you hit it, Jack. I mean, it's a slogan, right? It's not the substance of a group of people who are trying to respond to unfair policing, okay? But what I think is so they say, okay, well, the white lives matter. Well, that's a slogan that they have that's loaded with terms that are racist. And what I think is important is the police aren't on the side of white supremacists. That's not, if you say I'm for the police, okay, the police don't want that. They don't want the support of that group. Hey, we're with you, police, because they're professionals. They're gonna say, hey, look, thanks, but no thanks. Okay, and I think that the police departments are professionals, staffed by highly trained professionals, and that, you know, like if you look at what's happening in the LAPD, they are out there trying to be respectful of people's rights, and they're working through those issues. But there's not, you can't use a slogan like, okay, white lives matter, or and then
they can say, hey, police life matter.
Well, of course.
Yeah, Jack Xiao's life matters.
Yes.
Right,
but
something like that.
They're just taking a slogan, and that's what that is. And I think that you're exactly
very good, very good. My dear audience and my lovely friends, today we're discussing about what's happening, what had happened in Charlottesville, Virginia, and what is happening, what shall happen in this beautiful country of ours we call home. Stay with us. We'll be right back, please. Hello, my dear friends, my lovely audience. Welcome back to the discussion about the Charlottesville incident. With me today is my good friend Thomas Johnson. He is an attorney, trial attorney at law. My dear friend, a friend to the community. Every time we have questions mystifying like this, we want to ask him for help, for analysis. Now we're not talking about the event itself. We're talking about the legal perspective. See who and how much each party has a legal ground to do what they do. Otherwise, if they do not, and then we know exactly where the answer is, right? Now, let's go back to the Constitution site, right? Now, it all started, forget the or probably we could lay aside the stories behind the statute issue. There had been decades of issues of what were revivals of old issues about the Robert Lee's statue and monument whatsoever. Just starting from the point when the city councils talking about turning down of the statue, from that point, right, step by step, to which extent do they have the right to do what they did? For example, you're saying that the example case, the case law example case of the early 60s of what is that? What is that?
That was the Brandenburg case.
The Brandenburg case, right? So that regulates the local government with some power, right? So were they doing things within their power, so on and so forth? Back up from the very beginning, please.
Oh, sure. Well, that's, and this goes to when I say how our government is built. and it's terrific, because what our Constitution says is that the power that is not listed in this Constitution and the amendments, that power that's not spelled out there, the rest of the power belongs to the people. So unless the Constitution gives the federal government a certain power, the rest of it, and really, Jack, the vast majority of it, belongs to the people. And what that means is the different states. So there's a lot of power that rests in the local governments and how people live their lives. And this is a good example of that. So really the Constitution does not think of a situation where the federal government is telling a local government what should be put into a park or what should be removed from a park. So this is a city, town, local issue, and it's right that it is. So the local government is right to decide what's in the park, what time the park opens and closes, collect money to clean the park, what's the name of the park, and what statutes are going to be in the park. And do we put up a statute or do we remove a statute? And that's the local government gets to decide that. So let's say there's a town of Mayberry, an imaginary town.
All right.
And there is a old Civil War statute in there that is honors General Lee or someone else. That's the local government that has to decide what to do. And if the people don't like what the local government's doing, they can change the law, put in new representatives, and effectuate change that way. But the idea is that the local lowest level is the right place for the people to speak.
Issue number one, the local government, the council members together, the council chamber has the right to decide to make a resolution to remove that statute.
Yes,
right?
Or build a new one.
Or build a new one or something like that.
That's where the power rests.
All right. Now, step number two, if the local people, the protester, the white protesters felt that they didn't like it, what they want to do is express themselves. I mean, within law parameters.
Absolutely. So what we know from that Brandenburg, when there was even a hateful group like the KKK, right? They can take a permit and say, I want to have a rally. I want to have a protest at this park or in this location. Then the local government has to make sure that it grants a permit that's no different than if it was this group or the Girl Scouts. They can't say, I don't like your speech, but they can regulate the time, place, and manner as long as it's...
And the traffic, community safety, so on and so forth.
Right, and they can...
And noise control, something like that.
Sure, and then they can say, hey, you can be in this park, or you know what, it's not big enough. You can go to this park, as long as it's not based on a judgment of what that group is going to say. And so there'll be a permit issue that gives permission to be there. And then that's how it should go.
And at the permission now, now step number three, right? Once they got the permission, they go ahead to do it, right? Within the protest, they can't say, like what you said just now, fire, 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 like if they say in the theater stuff, right? Okay, now, to cry for white supremacism, to cry like a neo-Nazi, even have the Nazi signs, the Nazi flags, and somebody even do the salute thing, whatever, those are the expressions, whatever, not included in the freedom of speech. Am I right?
Wrong.
Wrong.
So, not wrong, Jack, because it's a great question. But what our Constitution says is even that type of speech that is so offensive to us that they can do that, okay? What they cannot do is say, you see those protesters over there, those other people, let's go get them. That is outside of the First Amendment.
Okay, let's go kill them.
Yeah, right. So they can say all their hateful things with their Nazi signs, And our First Amendment of our Constitution will actually let them do that, even though it's so offensive to us.
Okay.
We don't get to judge that speech.
I see.
But what they cannot do is they cannot say, all right, everybody, let's go get them. Now's the time. Let's get those fill in the blank. Let's get those communists, or let's get those homosexuals.
Yeah, that's what being said at the rally.
That's what happened in Charlottesville.
Okay, all right, good. In other words, it went overboard.
Well, it went way, but I think here's the bigger thing, Jack, is it was always going to. So those protesters didn't get there and say, let's get violent. They came there to get violent, and they attacked, and they came, when I'm saying those protesters, I mean those white supremacists and Nazis, they came there to harm those who they hate. And that is not protected by the First Amendment. That is terrorism.
And
they
step
killed
number
somebody.
4, the counter-protesters, what they did was that they couldn't accept what being expressed. Am I right? And they were there to defend themselves, and they approached them. They kind of mingled together. And then later, with a car driving in, and it goes elevated to kind of like a terrorist attack.
Yes, so 100% was a terror attack. The some people who look at speech have a nice saying, and they say the cure to hateful speech is more speech. So if you don't like someone's speech, have more speech, and so you can get different ideas. And
The speech versus speech versus speech versus speech.
Speech. Not you're not allowed to say that. Have more speech. Okay, so
And then started killing.
then the violence towards those.
And on the other hand, that exactly indicates where they are pushing, what they stand for. Am I right?
Well, I think that they weaponized, they being the white supremacists, weaponized their First Amendment speech rights. So they went from speech to violence, to mob violence, to terror, to murder. And that is not protected, and that is horrible.
All right, okay. Now things are a little quiet now. I mean at the Charlottesville, but the country, the whole country, kind of like follows with a day-to-day update. Day-to-day update. They kind of under the supervision of everybody. So what do you want to do? And here in this country, we have somebody did that much, and then we're waiting for the president to come out with a rightful speech, okay? And then we didn't get it. So what shall happen next?
Well, I think that we have to remember what happened, and when the next election comes up for the President of the United States, we remember this. That's what I think. In our country, what is another gift of our Constitution is that we're not stuck with presidents forever. We re-elect or elect new presidents, and the change is made at the ballot box. And that's a wonderful right. So many countries in the world, they're stuck for people forever.
Yeah.
Here, we don't have that. And that's another gift of the Constitution for us.
Okay, very good. My dear audiences, my lovely friends, today we're discussing about the Charlottesville event. That incident is not a single incident. It is really an indication about the United States, whereabouts of the United States. With me is my good friend, Thomas Johnston. He's attorney-at-law, trial attorney. He is helping us with some legal analysis to see where each side stands, to see where the Americans are at this very moment. So stay with us. When we come back, we'll put everything together and we'll do a thorough analysis. We probably want to ask our friend to give us some advices, what to handle, what to do in a situation like that. We understand that a few days later, probably 5 days from now, there's going to be another protest, quote-unquote protest, in several cities of the United States. if they were on schedule, what we're going to do. Stay with us, please. Hello, my dear friends, my lovely audience. Welcome back to the show, Jack Chow on East West with G&E TV. My friend Thomas Johnson is with me. He's an attorney, trial attorney at law, and he's using legal perspective to see where each party has a stand and where we're heading and what the nature of the problems and is there any solution. I have seen a funny story about the New Yorker, the magazine. On the front page of the magazine, this issue, it has a picture of Donald Trump riding a boat, little boat, with a sail that pulls up like a triangle shape, like this, with two holes on it to represent the Ku Klux Klan, their helmet, right? And Trump kind of holding the string, blowing it. He blows his own sail, which is that symbol, whatever. That's the cover for New Yorker, this issue. So, do you think that you and I, we're not alone? There are lots of people taking the same point of view. Am I right?
I think most people do. Most people feel the way that we do, in that we are not judged by the color of our skin. And that a president who comes out and is not clear on that, and as a matter of fact picks the side of white supremacists, I think most people in our country feel the way that you and I do, Jack, that it was terrible. Period. And I don't think there needs to be an excuse. Well, why did he think that way? Did someone tell him to feel that way? Is he just trying to get votes? Is he keeping his base happy? Look, I don't care why. What I do care is that it happened.
He's the president of the whole United States.
Yes.
Not on his own base.
It was real, and it happened. And things happen since the president's been inaugurated. There have been so many events that have happened so quickly. This is an event that I don't want to forget. I mean, I want to remember this because it's real.
Until next election, right?
Yes. And I think it's appropriate to speak out against it. Say, you know what, I don't like it, and I'm not afraid to say that to my friends or someone I know that might have voted for him.
Very good.
I don't like this.
And lots of comments say that Donald Trump has missed the golden opportunity to speak up properly, to have his image fixed, and now he is facing an even worse situation. Is that comment right?
Right. I mean, I think it's true. I think that it's time for people to realize that we're not rooting for a football team, or we're not. This isn't a sport. That even if someone's Republican and has never voted for a Democrat, that it's okay to say that I'm not okay with this. I'm not okay with the president doing this. I'm not going to minimize it, explain it away, or blame it on the left or Democrats or the media. I heard what I heard, and I'm going to remember it. And I think that it's important that Republicans and Democrats alike say, no, I'm not going to do it.
Very good. Okay, very good. Let's stretch a little bit to all the way to Abraham Lincoln. Well, he led the Civil War, fought all the way till 1868, when the South was defeated, though. At that point on, from that point, why wouldn't us just forbid all statues and monument and flags and everything of Confederation? Why wouldn't we have done that?
Well, I think that if you look at what happened, that the combatants, those that were involved, such a bloody, brutal event, needed to do something to mark it, maybe. Okay. So if you go back in time, you can see some of these statues that say, "This is erected for the boys in the gray, who wore the gray."
All right. All right.
And you could see, well, these, maybe they wanted to have it where young people who were killed or maimed were not totally forgotten.
All right. Okay.
And so I think that that's probably where that came from.
And after all, it's a civil war. It's not a foreign enemy war. Am I right?
It was a brutal, devastating war.
Yeah. Okay. And right, that symbol of our generous mindedness was taken as a inclusiveness of our concept. Lots of people read that way. Can we say that? Can we say that still?
Well, I think the idea was this, and I think a good example is this. General Lee, he was going to be indicted for treason.
For treason, okay.
For treason.
Ah.
And General Grant says, if you go forward with this treason count against General Lee, I'm going to resign from the Army.
Ah.
Okay.
I see.
So let's just look at that. So why would General Grant do that on behalf of General Lee? Because these two combatants had shed so much blood and so much horror on each side that I think they wanted the peace to be something that could be real. And so that was probably the feeling in the country. If we were going to have some healing, it can't be, you're on your knees, South. I think that was probably what the feelings were, that there had to be some tolerance to monuments.
In other words, we will still want the South to get a chance to stand up. Right?
Yes.
To stand up like a human. And then, as Americans, we together, hand in hand, heal the wounds, we look forward.
Yes, but I think that what we're talking about, Jack, is there's a third side, a third third leg to the stool.
Okay.
That is almost a white narrative. What about the African Americans who are dealing with the history of the 4 million slaves that were in the United States during the Civil War? We can't leave them. They cannot be forgotten. So yes, you have the North, you have the South, but also you cannot forget about slavery and what it did to our country. So what about the slaves and the descendants of the African Americans who descend from slaves and have continued to be oppressed since then? Can't forget about them.
All right, very good, very good. So talking about now, where do you think is the heal of this country, please? We really hate to see those split going on forever. We really want to include everybody. We want to shake hands with everybody. So together as Americans, we look forward. Where is the healing point, please?
Well, I think we go back to speech, right? Sharing ideas and having courage to talk about it with each other. You and I talking, saying how do we feel about these issues of our day? And if we continue to speak out about things we cannot stand for, then there's healing in that. And I think that we have to remember the cause of the Civil War and slavery. I think we have to remember that. And without remembering that, there can't not be healing.
So we have to learn more enough to understand the dark page of our history and to see it is quite something counter us back to glorify those days.
Yes.
Right? To glorify, to honor those days. And A statue is a statue. It's okay. Nobody looks at it anyway, right? But to declare the way they declared is really something dangerous. Am I right?
Yeah, I feel the same way. I feel that what they did was dead wrong.
And does the president has another chance to call for healing and rehealing?
I don't think that he can do that enough. I think that, I think he should be doing that and should do it and continue to do it. And it shouldn't just be words, but it should be the action of the government to do what it can to promote healing, instead of inciting more divisiveness. That's the least it could do.
Okay, the last thing, one last question. The social network has it that on the 26th, which is the coming Saturday, there's going to be lots of event across the country, including Los Angeles. Right? In case of something of that extent, that elevation happens, if you happen to be passing by, whatever, what do you want to do? Protect yourself.
Well, can you tell me a little more, Jack? If there is a protest and a counter protest?
I don't know. When there is a protest, there should be a counter protest, and lots of people say they are prepared
to counter protest.
Yeah.
So the idea is going to be that there are going to be some white supremacists and some people.
Similar. That's what they say on the social network.
Well, I can tell you what I would do is if there's white supremacists coming to Los Angeles, I will go and peacefully protest against that because I will have my voice heard. And I think that that's appropriate. But peaceful protest is the only way to protest. Nonviolent protest is the only way to give a message.
Very good. I like that.
Martin Luther King.
And I would like to borrow that statement to my audiences, and this is what I want too. You want to express yourself, you want to say something, however, you want to be bound by law, you want to just peacefully protest it. If you are saying, I'm prepared to do a fight, no, you're wrong, you're totally wrong. You're fighting yourself, or you want to speak out peacefully, properly, that's it, that's all you can do. Am I right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, very good. A little over time, but we're okay. My audience, thank you very much. And to my good friend, Tom, thank you very much.
Thank you, Jack.
All right,
Thank you.
All right.